Hello, guys. Welcome back. We're episode 8 now. We keep saying we're going to stop counting and then we keep doing it because it's the only way I know how to open an episode. Today, we are going to talk about party culture, maybe stepping away from the party scene, and how to find your feet when you're doing that. We're going to speak a little bit about our experience with it, how things maybe have changed for us, going from early 20s into now late 20s, early 30s. And yeah, hopefully just have a bit of a chat about living in line with your values, making you feel okay if this is something that you want to do, because this is actually a conversation I've had with quite a few people of this, I feel like I want to step away from the party scene, but all my friends are still kind of doing it, and just giving you permission to say that, hey, maybe it's not for you anymore.
Yeah, 100%. So we wanted to, start by talking about our experience with party culture and what our party days looked like and at what age we kind of stepped away from it and why we decided to do so. So Loz, do you want to introduce what your party days looked like?
Yes, we'll keep it PG. I partied pretty hard from I'd say 19 till 24-ish. So a fairly decent amount of time. More so the early 19, 20, 21 kind of era. I was always the person who was working really hard and then partying really hard. So I actually from the outside looked like I had it all together, right? I was uni, working pretty much full time, but then in my head, I was if I work really hard, I can party really hard. It was a reward kind of thing. And I think now from a reflective point of view, it's because I'm quite dopamine driven.
I think when you tend to be extreme in one area of your life, you tend to be extreme in all areas of your life.
Yes. And I think it's actually quite a common thing in the fitness space is the we'll all train till we throw up and then we'll, go out on the weekend.
Drink till we throw up also.
Yeah. We just get really good at vomiting. But yeah, that was I was going out pretty much every weekend with high school friends from that age. And then I can't remember exactly when it was. As I started to get like more successful or just even want more from work, it was definitely work that was my pivotal moment. If I felt like my productivity was starting to decline on like the Monday or Tuesday, I just was like, oh, I don't really like this for me anymore because I feel like I can't go and achieve all of the things that I want to achieve because of what I'm doing on the weekends. I probably still persevered for a while and kept trying to do both. It was actually last year that I probably went more definitive with it. So really up until like 28. In the years before 28, I would go like months at a time and not really drink or go out because I was working really hard and doing all of those things. But then I would still be with the mentality of when I go out, I go out. Like I'm going to send it. And it was last year when I was going through quite a difficult relationship situation and then breakup. I hit a point where I thought my mental health can't handle this. Like I can't, the anxiety or the feeling shit. I was like, I already feel so low. I don't have 10% to feel terrible. So that's when I started to try and go, I'm just not drinking anymore. I think it was I was trying to just feel better, right? I would do anything for that. But then, it was the same kind of thing of a few months would go past. And then as soon as I kind of like allowed myself to go, all right, I'll go out and have one drink, it was like the reins were off and I would just go all out again. And so I think it's probably been really this year that I just went, I can't kind of handle this anymore. I would wake up on the Sunday, after a big one and just not feel like myself. I was like, I don't like me. I don't like this version of me when I do this. And I wasn't doing anything bad. Like I don't get angry or I can actually handle a lot of alcohol. So I was never like the one throwing up or crying in the corner or whatever it was. I could just feel I have this switch of like, I'm not the person to have one or two drinks. And I think I tried to fight that for a long time. And my mum would always be like, just have a couple. And she's quite different than I am. And I was like, I can't have a couple. So just like identifying that in myself and not from a place of like self-shame or anything, just being like, this is just kind of who I am.
Yeah, and you've been in a pretty hard I'm not drinking at all phase for a while now. How long would that have been, do you reckon?
I think I'm almost at 100 days of not drinking. And before that, it was probably around 3 months in between each stint, I guess. But it was the final time where I was like, I'm not going to drink until I'm 30, which is until September next year. So like a full year is what I'm going to try and do. And that's just because things are actually a lot easier for me in this area, black or white.
Yep.
I can't handle the like, am I going to have one? Am I going to have two? Am I going to come home at 3 a.m.? Like it would cause me anxiety, and like going to events and stuff, the decision of am I going to was just like, as soon as I was like, I don't drink anymore, it just actually made things like a lot easier for me because everything just became clear. I didn't have to make the decision anymore. This is what I'm doing. And I just, there's been some nights where I'm like, I could go 1 or 2 or whatever, but it's not worth it for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Everyone's so different with that, how they operate. It's good that you've kind of recognized that within yourself, I think. So I guess like my experience with party culture, I was into partying like pretty hard from like, I want to say 16 till probably about, 23, 24.
Yep.
Just disclaimer, we do not promote underage drinking on this podcast. But yeah, I think like in high school, I started, getting into kind of the party scene, and I would be out like every Thursday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, a lot of the time too.
Young people energy is like,
Yeah.
I used to go to netball training and then go out.
Oh, yeah.
And then go to work.
I used to play state volleyball, and I would rock up like a mess every Sunday morning. Like I don't even know how I did that, to be honest. But yeah, like I think that, I had a big period where end of high school, uni days. So during my uni days, I also partied a lot. I was part of like one of the societies at uni that like runs a lot of the parties. So I was very much like involved in that, and it was almost like a big expectation that when I did go out, like I would send it and kind of be like the life of the party.
Become that person, yeah.
Yeah, and I would, I guess, be a lot of fun when I'd had way too many drinks, and so I kind of like that became part of my identity to kind of like be that person in those sorts of scenes, especially like at uni probably. And I think, it wasn't until I probably started getting more into the gym. Like I've always played sport and stuff, but I think like when I got into the gym and I did kind of start thinking about like, I think I want to compete in bodybuilding, I just kind of really noticed the impact of it on my performance and like how long that would kind of linger for. Obviously, I also learned a lot about how alcohol like is catabolic and it is not conducive to wanting to put on muscle mass. So I think I was like, I'm not really like helping myself in terms of achieving my goals if I am getting pissed every weekend or a couple of times a weekend. And I think that was probably the biggest driver in terms of me like kind of starting to step away from that, is that I did like want more from my training, and I realized I was really holding myself back from that. So I'd say around about that 24 kind of mark when I started competing, that was when I really like pulled back. And I think like, that first comp prep, I obviously couldn't drink for, I think it was probably about 16 weeks that I did that first prep for. And then after I did that, obviously like I went out after prep, like drank again. But during that time where I'd had such a big break from drinking, I was like, actually, like I feel so good not doing this.
Yeah.
And even like my birthday was during my prep, and I remember I like went out one night sober for my birthday. I ended up staying out till 4 a.m. completely sober. This was early on in prep. Don't promote doing that.
Wow, I could not do that.
Yeah, like wouldn't do that towards the end of prep. But it was quite early on in the prep. And I was like, wow, I was actually able to go out and have a really fun night completely sober. So it kind of like gave me some proof that I don't like need that in my life. So that was when I decided to kind of step away from it. But it was really interesting because a lot of my friends, I think I kind of realized, were just friends because we liked getting drunk
Yeah.
together.
This is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is probably like a big topic of like what we kind of want to talk about today. And I guess like finding your people and making sure you're hanging out with people that you align with, because a lot of the time you'll find like when you stop drinking, those people you're drinking with, you actually have nothing in common with them except you were just both like fun when you were out drunk.
Yeah.
And so I think like that was probably the biggest challenge for me, like navigating away from that. Like I lost contact with like a lot of those friends who I would party with, and it's not because like I don't like those people anymore or anything, but I guess we just kind of like wanted different things out of life. And I just kind of realized like we didn't have as much in common as I maybe thought when we were going out together every weekend. So yeah, that was when I really stepped away from it. And nowadays, like I still enjoy a few drinks here and there. I'm not as black and white as you. Like I don't need to say I don't drink at all. Like for me, it's quite easy for me to go out and just have like 2 to 3 drinks. And actually I've had a few people say to me before that like they admire how I can kind of just like sip on a drink and like just take it slow and, you know, sit on that same drink for a while. And I can really control like my intake and not send it to excess. So I do like being able to do that and have a drink every now and then. I think it's nice. I try and avoid having like big nights out because they just don't make me feel good. And I do feel like the flow-on effect is like, especially as you get older,
Yeah.
it lasts for like days. Like,
Yeah.
I reckon if I have too many drinks on a Saturday night, I'm not feeling good again till Thursday. And I just hate that in terms of like my productivity at work, my training performance in the gym. Like I hate that flow-on effect. So I do tend to like avoid the big nights out. Like they still happen every now and then. But they're very, very few and far between for me. And most of the time when they do happen, I usually do feel a little bit like, oh, I probably could have had 5 less drinks and still had just as good of a night. So I try and like avoid that feeling. Like if I am going to have a couple more drinks than usual, like I want to still like stop at the point where, you know, like I'm having a good time. I don't need any more and not just keep drinking for the sake of drinking. So that's kind of like my attitude towards it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think how you're saying with the follow-on effects, a big part of that is like what your baseline is. Like when you are drinking every weekend, I don't think like you or I would have ever fit into this category where like you're tired all week, like living for the weekend, not really doing anything, that kind of thing. But if that is you, your baseline is so low that you don't really notice like the impacts that the, you know, the late nights, the alcohol is having on you. But when, you know, we like feeling great, right? And like strong and healthy and, you know, waking up in the morning, feeling energized. Like when that's your baseline, yeah, I notice a huge dip after a weekend. And yeah, once you're like by Wednesday, you're like, I still don't feel back up to my really high baseline. Yeah, it's just like a cost that I'm no longer willing to pay.
Yeah.
I think a point on the 1 or 2 thing as well is like, I don't actually like drinking. So it's like people who like the taste or, you know, the people who like wine or with dinner or stuff like that. It's like, that's never actually been anything that I have enjoyed. So I guess for me, yeah, there's not, I always saw it as like, well, what's the point in having 1 or 2? Like this is my mindset, no one else's, because I didn't really like it, but I know that people do. And so it's like, yeah, that's great if you can do the 1 or 2 and like sip on it because like you're actually enjoying it. Yeah, I'm saying like my way's not better. It's just what works for me.
Yeah. And what works for you is going to be different. Like everyone is so different. I think it's hard though, like when you realize that, you know, oh, I don't really want this to be a big part of my life anymore. Like I really do kind of want to step away from that.
Yeah.
It's really hard to navigate, I guess, like communicating that to your friends and I guess dealing with like the judgment that comes along with that. Like, oh, you used to be fun. Like, why are you so boring? Like, you know, just let loose a little bit. Like, have fun. You know, don't take life too seriously. Like, just have a few drinks. Like, how do you kind of navigate that and like the judgment, I guess, that kind of comes with that?
Yeah, this is a conversation I've been having with quite a few people lately of this. I think it's like the age that we're at, but also maybe like the circles that we run in with maybe when you're trying to make a positive change for you, and drinking is a big one, that you can almost feel like you're moving in that different direction, like from your friends, which can feel really, really scary. And especially when the people who are making comments are, friends of 6 or 7, 8 years, you want them to think that you're fun, right? It doesn't feel nice because what they're really saying is like, oh, well, we don't like you being around if you're not going to drink with us. Well, that's how it feels anyway. Like, if you're not going to drink, then why are you here? Which then I internalize as like, well, that must mean that, they don't value my company if I'm not getting fucked up. I think it used to get to me a lot more, because I have been, like moving away from it for a few years, and I would be the one that was like leaving early on a Saturday night because I wanted to train on a Sunday morning or just stuff like that. And I was the only one in my friendship group who was really doing that. And when you feel like the one different, or like the black sheep kind of thing, it makes it 10 times harder because we're tribal people. We want to feel like we belong to our crowd. Things that helped me were, I had like a self-reflection where I thought, well, I can either sit here and bitch about the fact that I feel like I don't really fit in with my friends that much anymore. And again, the important point to make is that I don't have to, I'm not saying that their way is wrong. It just was no longer for me. I thought I can sit here and complain about it. My friends don't understand me. They're always making comments. Or I thought, well, it's really on me to go and try and find people who also don't want to do that. And more importantly, who want to do the things that I like doing, right? Like, if I message you and say, hey, do you want to train tomorrow, like Sunday morning? That's a pretty normal conversation for us. And this wasn't easy to find these kinds of people. I've been doing it for like a couple of years. I started going to, I know this is getting off topic of like how to deal with the comments, but it's an important part of dealing with them. Started going to like new group fitness classes, or like, the cold water stuff in Melbourne, on the beach, and just like doing different things, a lot of them on Sundays, because then I thought, well, I'm not just giving up my Saturday night, I'm like gaining a Sunday morning. I would start to do those things. And then when you feel like you can start to see that, oh, there's other people like me, it makes it a lot easier to hear those comments, because that like, it's not that you don't fit in, you're just maybe in the wrong room. So that really helped me, spending time alone and being like, well, what do I actually want from life? What are my values? I know we've touched on, like kind of, or maybe we haven't, like living in line with your values, and just really getting clear on what those are. Because when I felt like when I was younger, I was probably looking externally a lot for like my sense of self. My friends would tell me, and maybe I was the fun person. I was the one who could keep up drinking with the boys. And it's like, well, if I'm not that, then why would people want me around? And when I started to focus on, getting to know myself, it's just a lot easier to weather those comments, because I wasn't trying to I wasn't trying to be the person that they wanted me to be anymore. I was trying to be the person that like made me really proud. And also just stopped going to some of those things. It's like, you can be the toughest person in the world, but it's like, well, just stop sticking yourself in front of people who are going to make those comments. Because after a while, I just got quite firm with it too, being like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't appreciate you trying to make me do it. I would never try and make you not drink.
Yeah.
So if you appreciate my company, like, this is it. And if you're going to keep trying to make me feel bad, then I just won't come.
Yeah, I think it comes down a lot to like being confident and assured in yourself, and like act confident and no one will question you. So if you rock up to a party, you're like, I'm not drinking, but I'm still going to like have a good time, chat to everyone. I might hold a soda water or something so that people aren't asking me so many questions. But if someone does ask you a question, you're like, I'm not drinking. Like, I don't need drinking to have a good time. Like, just being really confident in your decision, and just like showing up how you want to show up, and like leaving when you're wanting to leave. Like, you don't have to stay until the very end. Like, if you don't want to, like, just be confident in your decisions. Like, that's kind of the best way you can go about it. But I think that's easy to say as well. Like, when you are in a place where you're more confident and assured as to who you are and what your values are, like for me right now, like that's easier for me to show up in that way. Whereas when I was 24 and I decided, oh, I'm not going to drink anymore really, then I stopped getting invited to things by my friends because I wasn't drinking. And that freaking hurt.
Yeah.
Like, I was literally being excluded because I was choosing not to drink so much anymore. And, like, that was really hard for me because I lost contact with, like, a lot of, like, my high school and even uni friends because of that. But I think that if that is something that you're going through, you need to, like, bring it back to, like, being okay with letting go of friendships that are, like, no longer serving you or aligning with you, and finding those friendships where you're on the same wavelength with those people. And I think, that comes back to what you just kind of said, like putting yourself in environments where those like-minded people are going to be. So if you are going to like a breath work event on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m., well, probably most of the people there didn't go out and send it last night.
100%. Yeah, all of them.
Yeah, probably. It's a pretty safe bet. And the group fitness gyms, which I think is like a big way of people like socializing nowadays. That's a great place to also kind of connect with like-minded people. Business, networking, upskilling, personal development type events. Like, there's so many spaces where you can kind of like meet your people. Even Instagram. Like, I've made so many friends.
We met through Instagram.
Yeah. So I've made lots of friends through my Instagram DMs. So, you find your people that way. And I think you just have to kind of not be too scared of letting go of people if they aren't willing to support you, regardless of your values and your choices, because a true friend will support you. Like, even if their values and choices are different. Like, I do still have friends that do like going out drinking, but it doesn't mean they don't support me and like my choices in not doing so.
Yeah, for sure. I think you just kind of have to be okay, because I know that you were saying like it's easier now to show up that way, right? And it's like it would have been harder like when you were 24 or 25. And hopefully this message gets out to people who are at that age, and then they can maybe start to feel okay with it perhaps like sooner than you and I did. Something that I would say on like the peer pressure kind of element of it is that when you are going out and you're saying like I'm not drinking, you can't cave. And what I mean by that is like, if you have said to the people in your circle, I'm not drinking tonight, and you mean it, and then they try and peer pressure you and they stick a drink in front of you and you cave, you've now opened up the door to, I don't mean it when I say I'm not drinking. But if you stick to it, like it probably only takes a couple of times, they stop trying to get you to cave because it's a pointless exercise.
Yeah.
But if you're the person that like rocks up to the event, right, and they're like, I'm not drinking, and all it's going to take is that one person to be like, come on, and they're like, okay. So it's like, that they don't even believe what they're saying. So I think it can feel uncomfortable like weathering those comments the first few times, but man, you build a lot of self-respect. I think I've built a lot with myself, just knowing that when I say something, if I'm not drinking, you can get 100 people trying to get me to do it, and I will not do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is important. I think it's also important, though, if you decide or if you change your mind as well.
Yes.
Like, that is okay too.
Yeah.
But I totally see what you're saying, and I agree, like, that if you do tend to still give in to that peer pressure, then you're not kind of like setting the standard that like you are going to follow through with like what you've kind of said. And obviously they're going to keep peer pressuring you every time.
Not one, but like, it's like, well, this is worth me doing because when I do it, they give in.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like I've got kind of the opposite expectation on me now. Like, people generally just assume I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
And so then, people might be like ordering drinks and not ask me if I want one. And I'll be, actually, I'm going to have a drink. Then, oh, okay. So, yeah, it kind of goes both ways, I guess. But I think the important thing is like, you've just got to act in line with your values because that's what's going to make you feel good the next morning. If like, for example, if I do go out and have a few drinks and like I don't get home till late even now, I don't feel bad about that
No.
decision. If I had a good time and that's genuinely what I wanted to do in that moment, because I'm acting in line with my values and I had fun and that was what I valued at the time. Even though generally I'm not a big drinker, it doesn't mean I can't go out and have more drinks than I usually would, have a good time and still feel good about it. Like, I think, yeah, it doesn't have to be super black and white as long as you feel good about your decisions. It becomes a problem when you feel like you can't say no or you can't have a limit or you're just not showing up as the person that you want to be. And that's when people then feel like the guilt's the next day.
Yeah.
So when someone pushes that drink in front of you and you like cave, but you really didn't want to, and then
Yeah.
it throws off your Sunday because you had these plans to do whatever it was you were going to do, whether it's train or work or whatever, and then you don't do it because you're feeling trashy because you had too many drinks. Like, that's when it just eats away at you inside. So I think the underlying message is that, like, if you can be strong in, like, what you value and what you want, regardless of, like, that external societal, like, peer pressure that's going on, like, that is the key.
Yeah. I think it comes down to, like, is this my choice? Right? Like, am I doing this because I am making the decision? Or am I doing this because it's kind of uncomfortable that everyone else is doing it and I'm not? That's not your choice. Am I doing it because someone stuck a drink in front of me and they're making fun of me and calling me no fun anymore? That's no longer my choice either. Something else that I would deem as, like, not my choice is, like, when I would go, 2 or 3 drinks and then have a bender. Obviously, logically, that's my decision. But I woke up the next day being like, that isn't really what I intended to do. And I let kind of like a side of me happen that I don't like. So it's like, yeah, that kind of living in line with your values. But, like, do you feel like this was a informed and deliberate decision? Or was it just a night that got away from you? Because I think it's the second one that feels like no good.
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh, it was a work Christmas party or whatever, and, I had told myself that, I could just let my hair down a little bit, you don't feel, even you might feel hungover, but you don't feel as bad about that because you feel like it came from you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk about liquid courage, I suppose.
Ooh,
and
okay.
I guess just like having the confidence, because I think it gives people a lot of social anxiety to go to something sober. And that's definitely something that I probably even do still struggle with a little bit. Like, I do find it a little bit uncomfortable when everyone around me is, like, drinking a lot. And I would actually say I'm quite a shy person. I might not seem that way to people. People tend to think I'm, like, super confident, but I have always actually been quite shy. So when everyone around me is getting in that, like, super loud state because they're all drinking, then I do kind of struggle to show up in that same energy. Whereas if I have had a few drinks, I can be loud with you. So I guess, like, what would your advice be to people who are kind of struggling with the social anxiety idea of going out sober?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't struggle with it as much now, but I think it comes down to, like, exposure therapy. So just doing it once and maybe even in, like, a smaller group, right? It's like, and then working out, okay, well, I went to this one thing sober and I was okay. I remember having a few nights when I would go to things sober early on and, like, being mid-conversation with someone and being like, oh, I can hold a conversation. Like, I'd never had a conversation before, but it was still surprising to me. Or I did, really get along well with that person, or I spoke to that new person. And it's just the kind of, like, showing yourself that you can. And it's nothing is ever as scary as it is in our heads. But when you are maybe looking down the barrel of, like, not drinking anymore, it can feel like, well, I've got 8 social events coming up. And it's like, just start with one. You don't have to make these grand, like, promises to yourself. Start with one and see how you feel. I often tell myself as well that, like, I find better connections sober. I don't really make that good of friends plastered. Like, I think holding the soda water can definitely help if maybe you're not confident enough yet to deal with those comments because
Yeah,
they do
especially
come.
like the questions from people you don't know
Yeah.
as well. Sometimes I think can be harder.
Yep.
So yeah, I was going to mention that. Like I think holding a soda water with some lime in it looks the same as vodka soda.
Yeah.
Or even like, I don't know, Pepsi Max, whatever. If you're holding a drink, it can help. It also gives you something to do with your hands. So
Yep.
you're not just kind of like holding your hands awkwardly. Like I think
Yep.
even that can just kind of help.
Yep. I think something that helps as well is if you are going with a couple of like good friends, even just like voicing if you're feeling anxious about it to them. Like if I had a good friend I was going with, I'd be like, oh, I'm not drinking, do you mind just kind of hanging out with me for the first little bit? If I didn't know other people, that kind of thing, like bring someone who's going to support you. So then at least, you've got like someone on your side and not everyone there is going to try and, be getting you to drink.
Yeah.
Another one that I would do, and this maybe doesn't help so much like on the night, but I would always plan something for like the next day, like early-ish, doesn't have to be sunrise.
To hold you accountable.
Well, to give, not so much to hold me accountable, but I think where people get stuck is they feel like they're giving something up without getting anything in return. It's like, oh, I'm giving up, the fun Saturday night. I'm giving up all of the social events, which firstly is not true. You can still go and have the fun Saturday night. You just don't, you're not sitting around a kitchen table at 11 p.m. at night with a bunch of people you don't know. But it's more so the like, well, what can you gain from this? So I would book brunch or something with a friend on a Sunday morning. I might book a gym class on a Sunday morning. Something that when I woke up that morning, I had that little dopamine win of like, I'm glad I stuck to my word last night. Not just waking up the next morning and you're hearing the stories from last night and you feel like you missed out. It's like give yourself that thing that you feel like you're gaining way more than you're giving up. That used to really help me and still helps me.
Yeah, fresh and productive Sundays are the best.
Yeah.
I look forward to them so much.
Yeah, and it doesn't really, it means that I don't even really feel like I'm missing out at all anymore. Maybe occasionally.
Yeah.
But definitely a lot less than I used to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about now just meeting people like in like a dating context. I guess we kind of spoke about this in our modern dating podcast, but I still think it's a bit relevant to talk about here.
Yeah.
I think something a lot of people struggle with who want to step away from drinking because they're like, yeah, this isn't really aligning with me. If they're single as well, they can be like, oh, this kind of is really limiting my options as to like where I can meet people. But something I want to say like on that is like, are you really going to meet your kind of person like drunk at a club at 1 a.m. if you don't want to be there either? And I think that's something that is really important to remember. Like, yeah, they might be there because they're in the same boat as you and they're like, oh, I'm single. I need to go out and meet people.
Yeah.
I also don't really want to be like, there is a chance of that.
Yeah.
But also like, I think a lot of pressure comes from the idea that people are single and they feel like they can't meet anyone unless they go out drinking.
Yeah, I agree. It is a definite fear that a lot of people like talk about, like if I can't go for drinks, what's the date? As you said, it's like the person that wants to go for a drink on a Thursday night, our lifestyles already don't really align.
Yeah,
Because
so
I'm never doing that, ever.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like the person who proposes that maybe isn't my person, because it's like it's probably just a gesture of like, hey, let's go get a drink and we'll meet kind of thing. But it's being okay with being like, hey, I don't really drink. Do you mind if we go for a coffee? And that serves two purposes. I think one is that like a coffee for me is a lot less pressure, and also I don't like my judgment being diluted when I am meeting someone for the first time. The second part is it's like you give them, if the person isn't willing to budge on like the drink to the coffee, it's like they're probably not that invested anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think it kind of like filters people out that way.
Yeah.
But as you said, like the person that I'm looking to meet is, I wouldn't bet that they're there on a Saturday night. It makes it harder because they're probably also at home.
Yeah.
So unless I'm, it's going to be harder to meet them. But a point that I wrote down is like, I'm just trying to become like the version of me that the person I want to meet wants to meet,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. It's very hard. It's a very difficult sentence to say, but like, not really like searching in places. I'm more just really, really working on becoming the person that I know my person is going to be really excited to meet and like have in their life. And that person to me isn't partying or drinking, because that's just when I feel my best and I feel like I know myself the most.
Yeah. I think we spoke a lot about like where you can meet people without like going out partying in the modern dating episode. So
Yep.
if you are interested in that, like refer back to that episode so we aren't kind of like repeating ourselves too much.
Yep.
But I think it's really important to acknowledge as well that if you are wanting to like step away from this drinking and party culture a bit, you do need to kind of like learn to be okay with like being at home on
Yeah.
like a Friday or Saturday night or both.
Yep.
And I think, you know, there's a few different strategies that I personally use to cope with that. And that is like filling up my days.
Yeah.
You know, if I've gone out on a hike, like I've driven an hour, done a hike, jumped in a waterfall, driven an hour back home and spent my whole day out in nature, like I don't feel the need to go out after that. Like
No.
I'm content
Yeah.
with my day. Like that was awesome. Or if I, you know, like do a group fitness class and go for a walk with a friend and then maybe I don't know, like do some grocery shopping and then I'll go to the beach and like, you know, have a like fishbowl dinner at Burley Hill with a friend. Like that's
Vibe. I'm
enough
in.
for me. Like, yeah, that's a great day for me. And, you know, you still book dinners with friends and things like that because, you know, like everyone, if they're not on comp prep, likes going out for dinner generally.
Yep.
With their friends. And that's a nice low-key thing you can do in the evening. But I think people get like scared of being at home alone in the evening.
Yeah.
It's like loneliness doesn't hit till like 7 p.m.
Yeah.
It's like no one has a problem during the day, but as soon as the evening comes, they're like, oh, I'm lonely.
Yeah. Get off Instagram. Just
Yeah.
like, but that just thought just popped into my head. Like, stop sitting at home on a Saturday night watching everyone party on their stories. It will not make you feel better.
Yeah.
Like it just is. You can be like, oh, I've got something planned for tomorrow, and I feel better about myself. You're still gonna feel like you're missing out. You're gonna see all the parties that you weren't invited to, or maybe the ones that you declined, and you're gonna see them, you know, filming stuff, making themselves look like they're having a heap of fun when it's like even in person they're probably not having that much fun. Just get off Instagram. Like you're not going to make yourself feel any better. Like ask yourself when you're sitting there, like what am I even searching for here? Am I just trying to see that they're not having fun so I can make myself feel better? Like just focus on what you're doing and, you know, learning how to be alone and like stop distracting. Because I think that's what kills people is the sitting at home seeing all of the places that they're not.
Yeah, it definitely gives you FOMO, even if you are so content in your decision
I
to
still
not
get
be
it.
there. Yeah, I still get it too. But yeah, I think just like make sure you're filling up like other portions of your day with activities and, you know, like find another friend that wants to do the same thing
Yeah,
and just invite
they're
them over and
there.
cook them dinner
Yeah.
or like watch a movie. Like, you know, we don't always have to be going out doing these big grand things to like have a good time. And like you said before, you have actually higher quality connections and conversations with you with other people, when drinking's not involved.
Yep.
So, you know, like foster those sorts of connections and fill up your time with that sort of stuff if it isn't something that you want to be doing.
Yeah, this whole like, you know, you're saying that people get lonely like at nighttime and on the weekend and stuff. There's like this weird pressure out there that like, oh, it's the weekend, like it's Saturday night. Like it's just a night. Like,
Oh, yeah. I remember having this conversation with someone and they were like, they went out on a Friday night and had a really big night and then they didn't go out Saturday because they were like too hungover. And then on Monday they were like, oh, I didn't go out Saturday night. So like now I just feel like I'm not ready for the week. Like, you know, I didn't go out and have fun. So I feel like I haven't like recharged. Like, what do you mean? You went out Friday. Like, you're just living for the weekends.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I'm not living for the weekends. I'm like, well, like, you literally are.
Yeah.
Like, if you feel like you can't, you know, have a normal productive week because you didn't go out and spend it both nights of the weekend, like, that's a problem.
yeah, that is a problem. 100%. To me, sometimes I even like forget that it's a weekend. I work a lot
Same.
on the weekend, like, but that's not kind of why. It's just, like you and I speak about a lot, creating a life where Saturday's not it's not a countdown to Saturday.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say,
Yeah.
is that like you need to create a life that you feel like you don't need an escape from. Like if you're wanting to step away from drinking, like focus on doing that, because then you don't feel like you need to like go out and let loose and let off steam, because you actually genuinely enjoy your everyday.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love my everyday, and that's why like I don't feel the need to like make that look dramatically different on a weekend.
No, yeah, exactly. I think, you know, on a similar theme, it's like, yeah, creating the thing and that you want more. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like the stuff that I've spoken about in terms of like the booking the things on the Sundays and all of that. But this is in like a bigger scale kind of line of thought. Like create the life that you want more. Because I know that when people ask me like, oh, is it hard kind of stepping away from partying or not drinking? And I can say like, really no. Like it's not really for me anymore. It's definitely better now. And the reason is because I have so many other things I value in my life more than that. So saying no to something on a Saturday night or going home early because I'm really tired, you know, from training and working, or just doing podcasting, like all of that stuff. But I fucking love that. So it's like, it is just not even a question for me anymore. Like, am I going to give up 3 days of getting to live a life I love and being productive and getting to chase my goals and do all of those things for like 3 hours of feeling kind of tipsy? Like, it's just not even, I'm like, I almost laugh. Like, that's not even a question for me anymore, because I'm so sure of like what I'm trying to do outside of that. And I think that's where people can get, especially in the first step. I'm thinking of a client of mine in particular who's like, was quite a big drinker and is trying to step away from it and is kind of going through this stage of like, well, who am I without the drinking? What do I like to do?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's taking the classes, it's having a look at your career. Is it something that you want to do? You know, like what does an ideal day look like? Not an ideal Saturday night.
Yeah, I think people forget like drinking is not really a hobby.
Yeah, but it is in Australia. It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But like if you are getting rid of that and it was like a big part of your life, like you probably need to replace it with like another hobby that you're like passionate about, because yeah, it does kind of become treated like that.
Yeah, and people can I just want to validate these feelings of like, who am I without the drinking is a fucking terrifying thought. Like, what do I like to do? You know, how do I want to spend my afternoons? And like, yeah, that's not something like the drink after work is never really something I've resonated with, because I've always been like, well, on to the next job, or like I'm trying to do stuff. So it's like I don't have a lot of dead time, if that makes sense. And I think people think that like, well, if I stop drinking, it's like, well, what else am I going to do? And that can come from a place of fear of like, oh, I don't actually do anything else. It's like, yeah, but you could. Like, you know, the you who's drinking doesn't have to be the you forever. It's like, you could go and do whatever you wanted. You could fucking do pottery classes, or like, you know, we want to do surfing lessons, like just shit that you've never done before. You now have time. It's like, what could you do with it? Can be exciting and not scary.
100%. So I feel like we've covered a lot in this episode that'll be really helpful. Do you have any takeaways you want to give people from this one?
I think we've kind of covered it. The only thing I would say is like we're about to go into a very social time of the year. And I know that this can cause a lot of anxiety for people. Feeling like they have to say yes to everything, feeling like they have to drink at everything. Like, it's cool if you want to prioritize like other things. You don't have to say yes to everything if you don't want to. I think it's coming back to that, like making a deliberate choice throughout this whole kind of like next period. It's like, if you look at your calendar coming up and there's a couple of things that you wouldn't mind having a few drinks at, choose those things and then maybe use the others as exposure therapy to go to sober. But just make sure that like anything you do is coming from your decision making and not out of like obligation.
Yeah. Yeah, I just kind of want to reinforce that same message basically, and just say at the end of the day, like, this whole episode isn't about like demonizing drinking or saying, you know, like you're better than everyone if you don't drink or anything like that. It's not about that. Like, the message that we really want to like get across is that like, in terms of everything in life, you want to be acting in line with your values and feeling like, yeah, you're showing up for yourself and the person that you want to be. So it's more so about empowering yourself by making a decision in the moment that aligns with what you actually want. So whether that is having a couple of extra drinks because you want to let loose for a night, that is completely okay. But if your decision is you don't want to do that, then be empowered in that decision and be confident in that decision. And the more you can act in line with your values and what you authentically want to do in that moment, the better you're going to feel about yourself. We only feel shitty about our choices when we're not actually acting in line with what we really want.
Yeah. Yeah. And if this episode can give them anything as well, is it's just there's other people like you.
Yeah.
If you're the only one in your friendship group now and you feel kind of out of it, there's other people who also feel the same way, and maybe you're not completely surrounded by them just yet, but it's the more that you go down this path, you will attract them. And yeah, Beck and I are like you too. So we can kind of be those people in the meantime.
Yeah, and we've made heaps of friends here
Yeah.
that are on a very similar page. And yeah, you will find those people, but you have to kind of remove yourself from the other people to find the new ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll leave it there for today, guys.
Yeah, and if you do have any feedback, questions, if you like the episode, if there's anything you want to hear in the future as well, feel free to chuck me or Beck a DM or the Empower Podcast Instagram page. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.